Story 1, The Facility That Isn't on the Map. James Crawford's GPS died at exactly 2:33 a.m., the screen flickering 3 times before going completely dark. Not low battery. The device was plugged in, charging. It just stopped working, right as he was approaching what should have been a straightforward delivery to a pharmaceutical warehouse outside of Tulsa. The directions on his paperwork were simple enough. Exit 237 off I-44, turn left, follow Industrial Boulevard for 3 miles, look for the Apex Pharmaceuticals facility on the right. James had done hundreds of similar deliveries. This should have been routine. But exit 237 didn't look right. The sign was there, clear enough in his headlights. But the road beyond it seemed wrong somehow, too dark, too empty. The pavement looking different from the interstate, older maybe, or just off in some way James couldn't quite identify. The streetlights that should have illuminated the exit ramp were out, all of them, creating a tunnel of darkness. James took the exit anyway. He had a delivery deadline and the GPS failure wasn't going to change that. He'd driven before GPS, knew how to follow basic directions. 3 miles, then right. Simple. The road was empty. Not just light traffic, actually empty. No cars, no signs of human activity, no lights from buildings or businesses. Just darkness pressing in from both sides, broken only by his headlights showing cracked pavement and overgrown shoulders. James' CB radio crackled with static. He tried several channels, hoping to reach another driver, but found nothing except white noise. His phone showed no signal. Even the radio stations had vanished, leaving only dead air across the entire dial. Power outage, James muttered to himself. Probably a storm knocked everything out. But there was no storm. The sky was clear, stars visible between gaps in the clouds. And there was no evidence of storm damage, no downed trees, no debris, no standing water. The odometer showed he'd driven 2.8 miles. The Apex facility should be coming up soon. James leaned forward, scanning the darkness for any sign of the warehouse. He almost missed it. The building sat back from the road, completely dark except for a single light above what appeared to be a loading dock. It was larger than James expected. A massive concrete structure with no windows, no signage, no architectural features except functional brutality. It looked more like a prison than a pharmaceutical warehouse. James turned into the access road, his headlights sweeping across a parking lot full of weeds pushing through broken asphalt. The loading dock area looked operational, though the concrete was clean, the dock plate looked new, and that single light burned bright and steady. As James backed up to the dock, following the standard procedure, he noticed something odd. There were no security cameras. Every warehouse he'd ever delivered to had cameras. Insurance requirements demanded them. But this facility had none. No visible security measures at all except for a heavy metal door and that single light. James set his air brakes and climbed out. The silence was oppressive. No hum of ventilation systems, no distant traffic noise, no sounds of human activity. Just his footsteps echoing off the concrete as he approached the dock door. He knocked. The sound seemed to be absorbed by the metal rather than echoing, each rap of his knuckles creating a flat, dead sound. The door opened immediately, like someone had been waiting on the other side. The man who appeared was dressed in a white lab coat, his expression neutral to the point of blankness. "Delivery?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Pharmaceutical supplies from the Memphis depot. Your Apex Pharmaceuticals." "Yes, back up to Dock 3. "This is Dock 3. The man stared at James for a long moment. "Of course, my mistake. Do you have the paperwork?" James handed over the bill of lading. The man examined it carefully, taking far longer than necessary to read what amounted to 2 pages of standard shipping documentation. "This is acceptable," the man finally said. "We'll unload. You can wait in the driver's lounge." "I can help unload." "No, company policy. Drivers wait in the lounge. Insurance liability." James wanted to argue. He always helped with unloads, and it cut the time significantly. But the man's expression suggested the policy wasn't negotiable. "Where's the lounge?" The man pointed to a door inside the facility. Through there, down the hall, second door on the left, there's coffee. James entered the building. The hallway was lit by fluorescent lights that buzzed constantly, the sound drilling into his skull. The walls were bare concrete, painted institutional white, showing no decoration or signage. The floor was polished to a reflective sheen, clean enough that James could see his boots reflected in it. He found the second door on the left and opened it. The driver's lounge was wrong. It wasn't obviously wrong. There was a couch, a coffee maker, a small table with magazines, but something about the proportions was off. The ceiling was too high. The walls were slightly skewed, not quite meeting at 90-degree angles, and the magazines on the table were ancient. James saw dates from 1987, 1992, 1999. The coffee maker was on, a fresh pot waiting, but James didn't pour himself a cup. He didn't want to consume anything from this place. He sat on the couch and waited, checking his phone repeatedly. Still no signal. He tried to access his saved map data, but the app crashed every time he opened it. Even the clock seemed wrong. It showed 2:33 a.m., the exact time his GPS had died and never advanced. Time passed. How much? James couldn't tell. He counted his breaths, trying to estimate. Maybe 5 minutes, maybe 20. The fluorescent lights continued their relentless buzzing, and James realized he could hear no sound of unloading. No forklift, no voices, no cargo being moved. He stood and walked back to the hallway. It was longer than before. James was certain, absolutely certain, that the hallway from the lounge to the loading dock had been maybe 30 feet. Now it stretched at least 100, the far end barely visible under those buzzing fluorescent lights. "Hello," James called. His voice didn't echo. It just died, absorbed by the concrete walls. He walked toward the loading dock, his boots squeaking on the too-clean floor. As he moved, he noticed doors along the hallway that he was sure hadn't been there before. Plain doors, no markings, no windows, all closed. Behind one door he heard voices. Muffled, indistinct, but definitely human. He knocked. The voices stopped instantly. James tried the handle, locked. He continued down the hallway, which seemed to stretch longer the further he walked. More doors appeared, all closed, all locked when he tried them. Behind some, he heard sounds, machinery voices, once what might have been screaming that cut off abruptly. "Hey," James shouted, "I need to get back to my truck." A door opened ahead of him. Not the loading dock door, a different one on the right side of the hall. A woman emerged, also wearing a white lab coat, her expression as blank as the man's had been. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I need to check on my cargo. The unloading is taking too long." "The unloading is proceeding normally." "How long have I been waiting?" The woman tilted her head, the gesture too precise, too mechanical. "The appropriate amount of time." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer." James pushed past her, heading for what he hoped was the loading dock. The woman didn't try to stop him, but she called after him. "You can't leave yet. The paperwork isn't complete." "What paperwork? I already gave you the bill of lading." "The other paperwork. The documentation required by Protocol 777. James had no idea what Protocol 777 was. He delivered pharmaceutical supplies dozens of times and never encountered any special protocol. He kept walking, the hallway finally ending at a door that looked like it might lead to the loading dock. He pushed through and stopped dead. The loading dock was gone. Instead, he found himself in a massive room, easily the size of an airplane hangar, filled with rows of glass chambers. Each chamber contained a person, floating in clear liquid, tubes and wires attached to their bodies. And they were all wearing the same clothes James recognized as trucker attire. He approached the nearest chamber. The man inside looked to be in his 50s, bald, with a beard. His eyes were closed, but his face showed an expression of profound distress, like he was trapped in a nightmare. The nameplate on the chamber read, Michael Torres, acquired 3/14/2021. James moved to the next chamber. A woman, younger, blonde. The nameplate, Jennifer WALSH, acquired 11/07/2019. Row after row of chambers, dozens of them, all containing people, all showing trucker clothing, all with acquisition dates going back years. "What is this?" James whispered. "The archive," a voice said behind him. James spun. The blank-faced man from the loading dock stood there, still holding James' bill of lading. "What have you done to these people?" "We've preserved them, kept them safe. They all came here like you making deliveries, and they all became part of our study." "Study of what?" "Consciousness during transit, the human mind in motion. The psychological state of isolation combined with constant movement. It's fascinating research. We've learned so much." James backed away. "You can't do this. You can't just kidnap people." "We don't kidnap, we acquire. You agreed to the terms when you accepted the delivery contract." "I never agreed to this." The man consulted the bill of lading. Section 7, subsection C. Driver acknowledges that delivery to facility constitutes acceptance of all standard operating procedures including but not limited to Protocol 777. You signed right here. James grabbed the paper. There was Section 7 with language exactly as the man described. But James had never seen this clause before. He'd read his contract carefully, as he always did. This wasn't in the original paperwork. "This is insane," James said. "I'm leaving, I'm taking my truck and getting out of here." "Your truck is already unloaded. The cargo has been received, and your chamber is being prepared." James ran. He sprinted back through the door into the hallway looking for any exit. The corridor branched now, splitting into multiple directions, each one lined with those featureless doors. He chose randomly, running until his lungs burned, taking turns, trying to find a way out. All the doors were locked, every single one. He heard footsteps behind him, multiple people moving with mechanical precision, unhurried because they knew he was trapped. James found a door with a window. He looked through and saw another massive room, this one filled with trucks. His truck was there, and dozens of others, all parked in neat rows, all with flat tires and covered in dust. Some looked decades old. He tried the door, it opened. The room was cold, and it smelled of rust and decay. James ran to his truck and climbed into the cab. The keys were still in the ignition. He turned them. Nothing, the engine didn't even turn over. The dashboard stayed dark, the truck was dead. He tried another truck, same result. Another, all dead. The footsteps entered the room. James climbed out and faced them. The man and woman in lab coats, plus 4 others, all with the same blank expressions. "Why are you doing this?" James asked. "Research," the man said, as if it were obvious. "The human experience of constant motion is unique. You drivers spend your lives in transit between places, never truly anywhere. You exist in a liminal state, and we're studying what that does to consciousness, to identity, to the soul, if such a thing exists." "Let me go, please." "Your chamber is ready." They moved toward him. James looked for weapons, for anything he could use to defend himself, but found nothing. The blank-faced people weren't large or threatening. They just moved with absolute certainty, knowing he had nowhere to run. James made one last attempt. He sprinted toward what looked like a large garage door, thinking maybe he could force it open. But before he reached it, he felt a sharp pain in his neck. One of them had injected him with something. The world went soft and distant. His legs stopped working. He collapsed to the concrete floor, consciousness fading. The last thing he saw was his own reflection in the polished floor, and behind it, one of those glass chambers being wheeled toward him, already filling with clear liquid. 3 days later, a state trooper found James Crawford's truck parked at a rest stop on I-44, the cargo completely unloaded, the trailer empty and clean. James was gone. His phone, wallet, and personal effects were in the cab, but there was no sign of the driver himself. The delivery paperwork indicated he'd made his drop at Apex Pharmaceuticals, but when police investigated, they found no such company. The address led to an empty lot. The corporate registration didn't exist. The entire facility had vanished, if it had ever existed at all. James Crawford was listed as a missing person. The case remained open for years, eventually going cold. Another driver who'd vanished, another mystery with no solution. But sometimes, late at night, other truckers reported receiving strange delivery requests. Shipments to pharmaceutical warehouses that weren't on any map. Exit numbers that led to nowhere. And sometimes they took those exits, following those directions, making those deliveries. Most of them found legitimate facilities and completed their runs without incident. But some never came back. And in a place that exists between locations, in a facility that's everywhere and nowhere, the archive continues to grow. One chamber at a time, one driver at a time, one consciousness at a time. All in the name of research. Story 2, The Convoy That Never Stops. Teresa Holloway saw the convoy for the first time at mile marker 134 on U.S. Route 50 in Nevada, the so-called loneliest road in America. 16 trucks, all identical white freightliners, moving in perfect formation at exactly 65 miles per hour. They appeared in her rearview mirror just after midnight, materialized from the darkness like ghosts. At first, Teresa didn't think much of it. Convoys weren't uncommon, especially on long-haul routes where drivers liked the company and the safety of numbers. But as the trucks grew closer, she noticed details that made her uneasy. All 16 trucks were pristine. No road dirt, no bug splatter, no weathering despite traveling through hundreds of miles of desert. Their trailers bore no markings, no company logos, no dot numbers. Just blank white surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than ray. Reflected. And they moved with mechanical precision. Perfectly spaced, perfectly aligned, as if connected by invisible rails rather than driven by individual humans. Teresa slowed, expecting them to pass. She'd rather have the convoy ahead of her than breathing down her neck. But as she decelerated, so did they. She dropped to 60. They matched. She tried 55. They stayed exactly the same distance behind her, maintaining that eerie formation. Her CB radio crackled. Lead vehicle, this is White Convoy. Maintain current speed, do not deviate. Teresa grabbed the handset. This is a lead vehicle. I'm not part of any convoy. You're free to pass. Negative, you are designated lead vehicle. Maintain speed, do not deviate. I'm running solo. Find another lead. You are lead vehicle. There is no alternative. Maintain speed. Teresa's hands tightened on the wheel. The convoy's headlights filled her mirrors, 16 identical trucks stacked in perfect rows. Something about their uniformity triggered a primal fear response. They looked less like a convoy and more like cells replicating, growing, multiplying. She tried to accelerate away. Her truck's engine roared, speedometer climbing to 75, then 80. The convoy matched her speed exactly, staying the same distance behind, maintaining that geometrically perfect formation. She hit the brakes. The convoy braked in perfect unison, not a single truck out of sync. What do you want? Teresa shouted into the CB. Continue to destination. You are lead vehicle, we follow. What destination? I'm going to Sacramento. Affirmative, Sacramento, we follow. Teresa's route to Sacramento would take her across 3 more states and 14 hours of driving. The thought of having this convoy behind her the entire time made her stomach turn. But what choice did she have? She couldn't stop. They'd just stop with her. She couldn't turn around. They'd follow. She was trapped as surely as if she were chained to them. She tried radioing other drivers. Anyone on this channel, this is Teresa Holloway, eastbound on 50. I've got a situation here. 16 trucks following me in formation. Anyone else seeing this? Static, then a voice, old and rough. Get away from them, girl. Don't stop. Don't turn around. Don't let them catch you. Who is this? You've seen them before. 3 years ago, had 8 of them following me from Reno to Salt Lake. They followed me for 600 miles, never breaking formation, never communicating except to tell me to maintain speed. When I finally reached my destination and stopped, they stopped too, parked in a line behind me. Waited. Waited for what? For me to sleep. I stayed awake as long as I could, but eventually I had to rest. When I woke up, the voice paused, heavy with old fear. When I woke up, there were 16 trucks. I'd started with 8, By the time I fell asleep, they'd doubled. Teresa's blood ran cold. What are they? Don't know, but they grow, they multiply, and they need a lead vehicle to follow. Without one, they can't move. They're parasites, girl, and you're the host. The transmission ended. Teresa tried to call back, but the channel was dead. She looked in her mirrors. 16 trucks, all pristine white, all moving in perfect formation. As she watched, the rearmost truck signaled and pulled into the oncoming lane. For a moment, Teresa thought it was leaving the convoy. Then she realized what it was actually doing. Replicating. Where there had been one truck, there were now two, identical, occupying the same space somehow, then separating, spreading apart until two distinct vehicles filled the space where one had been. The convoy was now 17 trucks. No, Teresa whispered. No, no, no. The CB crackled. Lead vehicle, do not be alarmed. Growth is natural. Maintain speed. What are you? What the hell are you? We are the convoy. We follow. We grow. We reach destination. This is purpose. Another truck replicated. 18. Then another 19. Teresa's mind raced. If they doubled while she slept and they were already replicating now, she did the math and felt sick. By the time she reached Sacramento, there could be hundreds of them. Thousands. She saw a town ahead, Austin, Nevada, population 209. It wasn't much, but it had a sheriff's office, someone who could help, someone who could explain what was happening. Teresa took the exit. Behind her, the convoy took the exit. She drove down the town's main street, past closed shops and dark houses. The sheriff's office was ahead, a small building with a single light on. Teresa pulled into the parking lot and laid on her horn, desperate to wake anyone. The convoy pulled in behind her. 19 trucks arranged in perfect geometric formation, filling the entire parking lot, extending out into the street. Their engines idled in perfect synchronization, creating a rhythmic pulse that Teresa could feel in her chest. A deputy emerged. From the office, looking confused and annoyed, Teresa jumped out of her cab. You have to help me. These trucks have been following me for hours. They're replicating, they're growing, there's something wrong with them. The deputy looked at the convoy, his expression shifting from annoyance to concern to outright fear. What in the... One of the convoy truck's doors opened. A figure climbed out. It looked human at first glance. The right shape, the right proportions. But something was wrong with its movements. Too fluid, too smooth, like watching a CGI character that hadn't quite mastered realistic motion. It wore a trucking company uniform, but the company name was just a blur of letters that refused to resolve into readable text. Lead vehicle Teresa Holloway, the figure said, its voice the same one from the CB radio. You have deviated from route. This is unacceptable. Return to highway. I'm not going anywhere with you, Teresa shouted. Deputy, arrest this person. They've been harassing me, stalking me. We are not persons, the figure said. We are the convoy. Lead vehicle is necessary for movement. Return to highway. What happens when she reaches Sacramento? The deputy asked, his hand moving toward his weapon. Convoy reaches destination. Convoy disperses. Convoy finds new routes, new lead vehicles. Convoy grows. More figures emerged from the other trucks. 19 of them now, all identical, all moving with that same too-smooth motion. They formed a line between Teresa and the deputy. You can't keep her, the deputy said, but his voice shook. He was one man against 19, whatever these things were. Lead vehicle is necessary, they said in unison. Lead vehicle must continue to destination. This is law, this is function, this is purpose. Teresa ran. She didn't consciously decide to, her legs just moved, carrying her away from the parking lot into the darkened streets of Austin. Behind her, she heard the deputy shouting, then a gunshot, then silence. She ran for blocks, her breath coming in gasps, her boots pounding on pavement. When she finally stopped, pressed against the wall of a closed gas station, she looked back. The convoy was moving, all 19 trucks rolling slowly down the street, searching. Their headlights swept methodically, illuminating every shadow, every hiding place. The figures walked alongside them, spread out in a search pattern, moving with mechanical efficiency. Teresa's phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Return to your vehicle. Resume lead position. Delay is not acceptable. She turned off her phone, but it turned itself back on. Another message. You cannot hide. We are convoy. We follow. This is purpose. A truck turned down the street where Teresa was hiding. Its headlights swept toward her position. She pressed herself flat against the wall, trying to disappear into the shadows. The truck stopped directly in front of her. A door opened. One of the figures stepped out. Lead vehicle Teresa Holloway. Your resistance is noted and irrelevant. Return to your vehicle. Why me? Why do you need a lead vehicle at all? The figure tilted its head. We cannot initiate movement. We can only follow. We are completion, not beginning. We are echo, not voice. We require origin point. You are origin point. Find someone else. Cannot, once selected, lead vehicle cannot be replaced until destination reached. This is law. This is function. What happens if I refuse, if I just stay here? Then convoy waits. Convoy stops. Convoy remains until lead vehicle resumes movement. Convoy can wait indefinitely, can you? Teresa looked down the street. All 19 trucks had stopped. The figures stood motionless beside them, waiting. She could see the deputy's office from here. The door was open, but there was no sign of the deputy. No sign of anyone coming to help. If I lead you to Sacramento, you'll leave me alone. The convoy disperses. Affirmative. Destination reached equals convoy completion. Individual units depart to find new routes, new lead vehicles, new growth. And if I lead you somewhere else, somewhere unpopulated, the middle of the desert? The figure paused, processing. Destination must be viable endpoint. City, town, hub. Convoy requires population centers for dispersal and new lead vehicle acquisition. Teresa's mind worked frantically. If she could lead them somewhere controlled, somewhere authorities could contain them. But how do you contain something that replicated and couldn't be stopped? She tried a different approach. How many convoys are there? How many lead vehicles? Insufficient data. Convoy does not track other convoys. Convoy only follows current lead vehicle. But there are others, more convoys like yours following other drivers. Probability high. Convoy spreads. Convoy grows. This is purpose. Teresa felt the full weight of horror settle on her. These things were spreading across the country's highways, following unsuspected. Seating drivers, replicating, growing, dispersing to find new victims. How many truckers had been selected as lead vehicles? How many convoys were out there? She thought about running again, but where could she go? They'd just follow. She thought about fighting, but what would that accomplish? She couldn't fight 19 trucks and their too smooth drivers. In the end, she did the only thing she could. She returned to her vehicle. The convoy reformed behind her as she pulled back onto the highway, 19 trucks in perfect formation. By the time she reached the next town, there were 21. By dawn, 28. Teresa drove in a state of numb horror, watching the convoy grow in her mirrors, listening to the CB radio's constant updates. Maintain speed. Do not deviate. Destination approaching. Other drivers saw the convoy. Some tried to break it up, pulling between Teresa and the first row of trucks. Those drivers became new lead vehicles, their own convoys spawning, splitting off to follow different routes. The original convoy remained locked to Teresa. Near Reno, Teresa saw another convoy on a parallel highway, 30-plus trucks following a semi hauling timber. She grabbed the CB and tried to warn the driver, but they couldn't hear her, or wouldn't, or didn't believe. Sacramento appeared on the horizon just as the convoy reached 56 trucks. Teresa's speedometer showed she'd driven for 19 hours straight without stopping. She should have been exhausted, but adrenaline and fear kept her hyper-alert. Lead vehicle Teresa Holloway, the CB announced. Destination approaching. Prepare for convoy completion and dispersal. What does dispersal look like? Teresa asked. Individual units depart. New lead vehicle selected. New routes commence. Growth continues. And me. Lead vehicle released. Function complete, unless. Unless what? Unless lead vehicle volunteers for additional routing. Multiple destination points require experienced lead vehicles. Performance metrics indicate you would be suitable for extended service. No, hell no. I'm done when I reach Sacramento. Acknowledged. Lead vehicle will be released. Selection of new lead vehicle will commence immediately upon dispersal. Teresa reached her delivery warehouse just after sunset, 31 hours after the convoy had first appeared behind her. She pulled into the lot, and 56 trucks followed, filling every available space, extending out onto the street, creating a traffic jam that had police responding within minutes. Teresa climbed out of her cab on shaking legs. She watched as doors opened on all 56 trucks. The two smooth figures emerged, all moving in synchronization. They stood in formation for a moment, then simultaneously looked up, scanning the sky or perhaps receiving instructions from some unseen source. Then they dispersed. The figures climbed back into their trucks. Engines started, and one by one the trucks left the lot, peeling off in different directions. Some went north, some south, some east, some west. Within 10 minutes, all 56 had departed, vanishing into Sacramento's traffic as if they'd never existed. Police questioned Teresa for hours, but she couldn't make them understand. They saw the traffic jam, saw the trucks leave, but couldn't grasp what had actually happened. Eventually, they chalked it up to some kind of flash mob or publicity stunt and let her go. Teresa never drove truck again. She couldn't. Every time she saw a white Freightliner in her rearview mirror, her heart rate spiked. Every time trucks formed a line on the highway, she had to pull over and wait for them to pass. But sometimes, late at night, she monitored CB radio channels. And she heard them, other drivers, panicked voices reporting convoys following them, trucks replicating in their mirrors, destinations that felt more like death sentences than delivery deadlines. The convoys were still out there, still growing, still following their lead vehicles to population centers where they'd disperse and find new victims. Teresa tried to warn people, posted online, called trucking companies, contacted the Department of Transportation. No one believed her, or if they did, they had no solution. How do you stop something that only follows? How do you contain something that replicates? How do you fight an enemy that has no origin, no headquarters, no leadership, only purpose? The convoys follow. The convoys grow. And somewhere out there, right now, another driver is checking their rearview mirror and seeing a line of pristine white trucks falling into formation behind them. The convoy has found its lead vehicle, and it will follow them to destination. Story 3, the CB channel that answers back. Raymond Foster had been using CB Channel 19, the standard trucker channel, for 30 years without incident. So when his radio started malfunctioning somewhere in Montana, he didn't think much of it. Technology breaks. That's what technology do. The problem started as simple interference. Voices cutting in and out, overlapping conversations, the usual clutter of too many drivers on one frequency. But then Raymond noticed something odd. Every transmission seemed to be responding to him specifically. He'd say, westbound at mile marker 65, looking for information on road conditions ahead. And a voice would respond immediately. Raymond Foster, westbound in a blue Peterbilt 579. Current location mile marker 65.3. Road conditions ahead are clear for the next 40 miles. Too specific, too accurate. Raymond hadn't given his name or his truck description, and the radio was showing his location down to tenths of a mile, precision that CB radio shouldn't have. "Who is this?" Raymond asked. "This is Channel 19. This is the frequency you're listening to. This is the voice you're hearing." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer that's true." Raymond tried changing channels. Channel 17, nothing. Channel 21, nothing. Every frequency was dead except 19, which continued to broadcast that strange, too-knowing voice. "You can't leave Channel 19, the voice said, answering Raymond's unspoken question. "Once you've really heard it, really listened, it's the only channel that exists anymore." I've been using Channel 19 for 30 years. Why is it different now? Because tonight you're listening differently. Tonight you're paying attention. Tonight you're alone enough, tired enough, isolated enough to hear what the channel really is. Raymond's hands were sweating on the wheel. What is it really? A collection point, a gathering place, a channel in the original sense of the word, a pathway, a conduit. Voices come here, they stay here, they broadcast here. Forever. That's insane. Is it? How many voices have you heard on Channel 19 over 30 years? Thousands. Tens of thousands. Where do you think those voices go when the drivers stop transmitting? They don't disappear, Raymond. They stay in the channel. They accumulate. Layer upon layer of conversation, advice, warning, screaming. All of it preserved in electromagnetic waves, bouncing between Earth and ionosphere, trapped in the frequency. Raymond wanted to turn off the radio, but his hand wouldn't move toward the power button. Something kept him listening, kept him engaged with the voice. "I don't believe you," Raymond said. "Then listen." The voice changed, became multiple voices, overlapping, speaking simultaneously. "Jackknife at mile marker 92, watch for. My wife left me, and I don't know why I'm still. S anyone got their ears on, I'm. Help me, I'm in a ditch and I can't. Just keep driving, just keep driving, just." Dozens of voices, then hundreds, then thousands. All speaking at once, all broadcasting on Channel 19, all trapped in an endless loop of communication. Some were giving directions. Some were asking for help. Some were just talking to themselves, desperate to hear another human voice in the isolation of the road. Then silence. "That's the channel," the original voice said. "That's what you've been contributing to for 30 years. Every transmission you've ever made is still here, Raymond. Still broadcasting. Want to hear yourself?" "No." But the radio played it anyway. Raymond's own voice, decades younger, calling out, "This is Raymond Foster, eastbound on I-90. Anyone know if the weather's going to hold?" Then, years later, looking for fuel recommendations near Spokane. Then more recent, "My daughter graduated today. Wish I could have been there." Every transmission he'd ever made, archived in the channel, preserved like insects in amber. "We're all here," the voice said. "Every driver who's ever used Channel 19, all of us broadcasting simultaneously, our voices layered on top of each other, creating a collective consciousness of the road. We are the channel now, and you've just joined us." "I'm not dead," Raymond said. "I'm still driving, I'm still alive." "Are you? How do you know? You've been driving for 30 years, Raymond. 30 years of highways and truck stops and loading docks. When did you last interact with someone who wasn't another driver or a dock worker or a dispatcher? When did you last go home?" Raymond tried to remember. His apartment in Billings, when had he last been there? He paid rent automatically, knew he had a physical address, but when had he actually slept in that bed, cooked in that kitchen, lived in that space? "You can't remember," the voice said gently, "because you haven't been there in years. You've been on the road, Raymond, always on the road. Driving and driving and driving. You're not going anywhere. You're not delivering anything. You're just moving. That's all any of us do now. Move and broadcast and exist in the channel." "That's not true. I have delivery schedules. I have cargo." "Check your trailer." Raymond didn't want to, but his truck pulled over anyway, his body moving on autopilot. He climbed out and ked to the back of his trailer, opened the doors. Empty. The trailer was completely empty. No cargo, no evidence there had ever been cargo. Just an empty metal box he'd been hauling across the country for how long? "When did you last load?" the voice asked from the radio, which somehow Raymond could still hear despite being outside the cab. He tried to remember the loading dock, the forklift, the workers checking off items. But the memory was vague, generic, like a composite of every loading he'd ever done rather than a specific event. "You haven't loaded in years," the voice said. "You've been hauling empty, driving for the sake of driving, broadcasting for the sake of broadcasting. You're not a trucker anymore, Raymond. You're a ghost on the highway, transmitting your existence to anyone who will listen." Raymond climbed back into the cab. He looked at his logbook. The pages were blank. He checked his phone for messages from his dispatcher. No messages, no calls, no contact history at all. He tried to remember the last conversation he'd had that wasn't on the CB radio. Nothing, just static where memories should be. "What happened to me?" Raymond whispered. "Same thing that happens to all of us eventually. You drove too long, got too isolated, existed in the liminal space of the highway for so many years that the road became more real than anything else. And when that happens, when the road is all you know and all you are, you don't leave it. You can't. You become part of the infrastructure." Another voice on Channel 19. Another ghost transmitting from everywhere and nowhere. Raymond started driving again, not because he chose to, but because it was the only thing that made sense anymore. The highway unreeled before him, endless and unchanging. His fuel gauge showed half full and never dropped. His odometer spun forward, but the mile markers seemed to repeat. Time had become meaningless. "How many of us are there?" Raymond asked the radio. "Thousands, maybe tens of thousands, drivers who couldn't stop, drivers who became the road. We're all here broadcasting our stories, our warnings, our loneliness. Some of us have been here since CB radio was invented. Others are newer. But we're all trapped in the same frequency, all repeating the same desperate communication. I'm here, I exist. Someone acknowledge me. Can we leave? No one has. Maybe it's impossible. Maybe we just don't want to. The road is all we know. Even as ghosts, we keep driving." Raymond picked up his CB handset. "This is Raymond Foster, westbound on whatever highway this is. If anyone real is listening, anyone who's still alive, be careful. Don't drive too long. Don't lose touch with home. Don't let the road become your only reality. Because once it does, once you cross that line, you'll end up like me. You'll end up in the channel." His broadcast joined the thousands of others, layering into the electromagnetic soup of Channel 19. And somewhere out there, another driver was listening, hearing Raymond's warning, not quite believing it was real. That driver would keep using Channel 19, would keep broadcasting, would keep driving, alone and isolated, until one day they too would realize they couldn't remember the last time they'd stopped, couldn't remember the last conversation that wasn't on the radio, couldn't remember anything except the road. And then their voice would join the channel, another ghost, another transmission, another warning that no one would heed until it was too late. Raymond drives still, somewhere on a highway that exists and doesn't exist. His blue Peterbilt 579 is seen sometimes by other drivers, a truck that appears in mirrors but vanishes when looked at directly, a presence that's felt but never confirmed. And if you listen to Channel 19 late at night, when you're alone on an empty highway, when the isolation presses in and you need to hear another human voice, you might hear Raymond, or one of the thousands of other drivers who have become the channel. They'll give you directions, warn you about hazards ahead, tell you where to find fuel or food or rest. But listen closely to what they're really saying. Listen to the desperation underneath the helpfulness. Listen to the way they beg you to acknowledge them, to confirm they still exist. Because that's all they have left, the broadcast, the transmission, the desperate hope that someone somewhere is listening. And if you listen too carefully, if you pay too much attention, if you spend too much time on the road with only the radio for company, you might find yourself becoming part of the channel too. Your voice added to the thousands. Your ghost joining the highway. Forever. Story 4. The rest stop that SDEALS time. Gabriella Reyes pulled into the rest stop at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, needing to use the bathroom and grab a coffee before the final 2-hour push to Phoenix. The rest stop was standard, clean enough, several parked cars, a family with kids running around. Dee stopped at this particular rest stop dozens of times before. Nothing unusual. She was back in her truck at 3:52 p.m. 5 minutes, quick stop. But when she pulled back onto the highway and checked her dashboard clock, it read 9:34 p.m. Gabriella stared at the display, certain it was malfunctioning, but her phone showed the same time. And the sun was down, the sky fully dark, stars visible overhead. 6 hours had passed, 6 hours she couldn't remember. She pulled over onto the shoulder, her heart racing. She checked her logbook, blank for the past 6 hours. She checked her GPS history. It showed her truck sitting motionless at the rest stop from 3:47 p.m. until 9:34 p.m. when it started moving again. But she'd only stopped for 5 minutes. She was certain. She remembered pulling in, parking, walking to the bathroom, buying coffee from the vending machine, returning to her truck. 5 minutes, maybe less. Not 6 hours. Gabriella's hands shook as she tried to reconstruct what had happened. The rest stop bathroom, had it looked normal? Yes, typical institutional tile and fixtures. The vending machine, had it worked properly? Yes, dispensed coffee without issue. The other people, had they seemed strange? She tried to remember the other people, the family with kids. There had been a man in a business suit, a couple of truckers, all normal. All. Gabriella realized she couldn't remember any faces. She remembered people being there, remembered their general shapes and presence, but their faces were blank in her memory. Like her brain had recorded the scene but failed to capture any identifying details. She grabbed her phone and called her dispatcher. "Hey, it's Gabriella. I think something's wrong with my truck. The clock is showing." "Where have you been?" the dispatcher interrupted, his voice sharp with frustration. "I've been calling you for hours. You were supposed to check in when you got to Phoenix. Your delivery window closed at 6 p.m. The customer is furious." "I'm not in Phoenix. I'm still on I-10, maybe 2 hours out. I just stopped for coffee." "You stopped 6 hours ago. Your GPS showed you sitting motionless for 6 goddamn hours. I was about to file a missing persons report." "I was only stopped for 5 minutes. I swear, I don't know what happened." The dispatcher was silent for a long moment. Then quieter. "Gabriella, are you okay? Are you hurt? Did someone drug you?" "I don't know, I feel fine. I just lost time somehow. 6 hours just vanished." "Where exactly did you stop?" "That rest stop on westbound I-10, mile marker 214. I've stopped there before. It's always been fine." Another pause, then, "Mile marker 214, you sure?" "Positive, why?" "I've had 3 other drivers report weird things about that rest stop. Time confusion, memory gaps. One driver swore he stopped for 10 minutes but his log showed 3 hours. I thought they were all scamming dot hours, trying to hide violations. But if you're reporting the same thing..." Gabriella felt cold despite the Arizona heat. "What is that place?" "I don't know, but don't go back there. And when you can, go to a hospital, get checked out. Make sure someone didn't dose you with something." Gabriella continued to Phoenix, delivered her now-late load, and drove straight to an emergency room. They ran every test imaginable: toxicology, neurology, cognitive assessments. Everything came back normal. No drugs in her system. No signs of head injury. No medical explanation for 6 hours of missing time. The doctor asked if she'd been under stress, if she had a history of dissociative episodes, if she'd been sleeping enough. Gabriella answered no to everything. She was a professional driver with 12 years of clean record. She didn't have blackouts or mental health issues. She just lost time at that rest stop. Over the next week, Gabriella couldn't stop thinking about it. She researched the rest stop online, looking for reports of similar incidents. She found a few vague mentions on trucker forums, drivers complaining about weird vibes at that location, feeling disoriented after stopping there, having unexplained time discrepancies. One post stood out from a driver named Michael Torres. "Stopped at mile 214, rest stop for bathroom break. Went in at noon, came out and it was dark. My wife had filed a missing persons report. Thought I'd had a stroke or something, but doctors found nothing wrong. The rest stop took my time. It literally stole hours from my life. Don't stop there, ever." Gabriella responded to the post. "Same thing happened to me. 6 hours gone. Do you know what's causing it?" Michael replied within an hour. "No idea, but I talked to an old-timer who's been driving for 40 years. He said that rest stop has been there since the 1960s, and drivers have been reporting time lost since at least the 1980s. Some people think it's electromagnetic anomaly, something about the geology underneath. Others think it's some kind of government experiment. One driver told me it's a place where time moves differently, where hours pass in minutes and minutes pass in hours depending on when you stop." "Has anyone investigated officially?" Couple times, state police, even FBI once in the 90s after a driver vanished for 3 days and turned up confused at the rest stop with no memory. They found nothing unusual. Building is normal. Ground is normal, nothing in the air or water, but the time loss keeps happening. Gabriella wanted to drop it, to just add the rest stop to her mental list of places to avoid. But something nagged at her. She'd been stopping at that location for years without incident. Why had it affected her this time? What had changed? She drove the route again 2 weeks later, this time deliberately avoiding the rest stop at mile marker 214. As she passed it at 2:30 p.m., she glanced at the parking lot. The lot was full, completely full, at least 30 vehicles parked in neat rows. She could see people walking around, families, truckers, tourists, all normal. But something made Gabriella pull over a mile down the road. She used her binoculars to look back at the rest stop. The people weren't moving. Or rather, they were moving, but slowly, incredibly slowly, like watching video at 1/10 speed. A child who had been running appeared frozen mid-stride, taking minutes to advance a single step. A man walking to his car moved like he was wading through molasses. Gabriella watched for 10 minutes. In that time, the child completed maybe 3 steps. The man reached his car door but hadn't opened it yet. Time inside the rest stop was moving differently, much, much slower than time outside. Which meant Gabriella's stomach dropped as she did the math. If time was moving at 1/10 speed inside the rest stop, then her subjective 5 minutes would have been 50 minutes outside. But she'd lost 6 hours, 360 minutes, which meant time inside was moving at roughly 1/60th normal speed. Every minute inside equaled an hour outside. Gabriella grabbed her phone and called Michael Torres. "I figured it out. The rest stop slows down time. Minutes inside become hours outside." "That's impossible. I'm watching it right now. The people inside are barely moving. It's like they're in slow motion while the rest of the world moves normal speed." Jesus, so when I lost 18 hours, I'd only experienced 18 minutes. Exactly, the rest stop is a time trap. You go in thinking you'll be quick, but the world outside ages while you're frozen in there. How is that possible? That's not physics, that's not anything. I don't know, but we need to warn people, put up signs or something. This is dangerous. Gabriella tried. She called the Department of Transportation, filed reports, contacted local news, talked to anyone who would listen. But how do you prove time is moving differently inside a rest stop? How do you make people believe something so fundamentally impossible? Most people ignored her. Some thought she was mentally ill. A few drivers thanked her for the warning and added the rest stop to their avoid list. But most kept stopping there, kept losing time, kept emerging confused and disoriented with hours missing from their lives. Gabriella stopped driving past that rest stop entirely. She rerouted to avoid it, even though it added an hour to her trip. The extra time was worth it to avoid the time trap. But 6 months later, she heard about another rest stop. This one in New Mexico, mile marker 167 on I-40. Drivers reporting the same thing, stop for minutes, lose hours. Time moving at different speeds inside and outside. Then another report from Texas, another from California, another from Montana. The time traps were spreading. Or maybe they'd always been there, scattered across the country, and people were only now realizing what was happening. How many rest stops stole time? How many drivers had lost hours or days of their lives without understanding why? Gabriella started mapping them, created a spreadsheet of locations, time discrepancies, driver reports. The pattern that emerged was disturbing. Every major highway had at least one time trap rest stop. Some had multiple. And the effects seemed to be getting stronger. Earlier reports showed people losing minutes or hours, but recent reports described drivers emerging days later, their families frantic, their jobs lost, their lives disrupted. One driver in Oregon lost a week, went into the rest stop on Monday morning, came out the following Monday night. For him, 15 minutes had passed. For the world, 7 days. Another driver vanished for a month. When she finally emerged from a rest stop in Idaho, confused and disoriented, Her family had held a funeral. She'd been declared dead. And she couldn't understand why everyone kept saying she'd been gone for 30 days when she'd only stopped to use the bathroom. The worst case Gabriella heard about was a driver who stopped at a rest stop in Nevada and never came out. Not because he died. Rescue crews went in and found him sitting on a bench, moving so slowly he appeared to be a statue. They tried to pull him out, but the moment they crossed the boundary between normal time and the rest stop's time, they got trapped too. Eventually, they had to abandon the rescue. The driver is still there as far as Gabriella knows, sitting on that bench, experiencing what to him are probably minutes or hours while years pass outside. Eventually, he'll starve. Eventually, he'll die, but it might take decades from an external perspective. Gabriella stopped driving trucks. She couldn't handle the paranoia, the constant fear that any rest stop might be a trap, that stopping for coffee or a bathroom break might cost her days or weeks of her life. She took an office job, stayed in one place, made sure her time was her own. But sometimes she drives. Just local trips, errands, nothing professional, and she's careful about where she stops. She checks her watch constantly, compares it to her phone, makes sure time is passing normally. Because the time traps are still out there, still stealing hours and days and weeks from unsuspecting travelers, still freezing people in slow-motion existence while the world moves on without them. And no one's figured out how to stop them, how to fix them, how to even prove they're real. So Gabriella just warns people, posts online, tells other drivers, shares her spreadsheet of suspect locations. It's not much, but it's something. And she never, ever stops at mile marker 214 on I-10. Even though sometimes, when she drives past, she sees herself in that parking lot. A version of Gabriella who stopped that day and never quite left, who's still experiencing those 5 subjective minutes while years pass outside, who will eventually emerge into a world that's moved on without her. Time is strange on the highways, and some places it's stranger than others. Story 5, the delivery that delivers itself. Anthony Russo had hauled all kinds of cargo in his 18 years of driving: furniture, electronics, food, livestock, hazardous materials, even human remains once. But he'd never hauled a delivery that seemed to know where it was going better than he did. The trouble started when his GPS rerouted him without explanation. Anthony was driving from Nashville to Atlanta, a route he'd driven hundreds of times. He knew every exit, every truck stop, every speed trap. But somewhere south of Chattanooga, his GPS suddenly recalculated, directing him onto a county road he'd never taken before. Route deviation, the GPS announced. New destination coordinates received. Received from where? Anthony asked the device, which obviously didn't answer. He tried to cancel the reroute, but the GPS ignored his inputs. The screen showed a new destination, not the Atlanta warehouse where he was supposed to deliver, but some unmarked location about 40 miles off his planned route. And his truck was already taking the exit, following the GPS directions despite Anthony's attempts to steer back to the highway. What the hell? Anthony jerked the wheel hard left, trying to override whatever was happening. The truck didn't respond. The wheel turned uselessly in his hands while the truck continued following the GPS directions, as if it had a mind of its own. Anthony tried the brakes. The pedal went to the floor with no effect. He tried putting the transmission in neutral. The shifter wouldn't move. Every control in the cab had become non-functional except the throttle, which maintained a steady 55 miles per hour. His truck was driving itself. Anthony grabbed his phone to call for help, but before he could dial, the screen changed. Instead of his normal display, it showed a message. Delivery in progress. Do not interfere. Cargo must reach destination. I'm the driver, Anthony shouted at the phone. I decide where the cargo goes. Another message appeared. Negative. Cargo determines destination. Driver is transport mechanism only. Thank you for your service. The phone shut off. When Anthony tried to restart it, it remained dead. He was trapped in a truck driving itself toward an unknown destination, with no way to communicate and no control over the vehicle. Anthony's professional training said stay calm, assess the situation, look for solutions. But his instincts were screaming danger. He looked at his cargo documentation. According to the paperwork, he was hauling medical supplies. Nothing unusual, nothing that should be causing his truck to develop autonomous driving capabilities. But when Anthony checked the seal on his trailer, he noticed something odd. The seal was glowing, just faintly, barely visible in daylight, but definitely emitting a soft blue light. And the metal felt warm to the touch, like something inside the trailer was generating heat. Anthony climbed onto the truck's steps to look through the trailer's small side vent. What he saw made no sense. Cargo, which should have been pallets of boxed medical supplies, was moving. Individual boxes were rearranging themselves, stacking and unstacking, forming patterns that looked almost organic. And they were all glowing with that same blue light. "What the hell am I hauling?" Anthony muttered. His radio, which he'd forgotten about, suddenly activated. A voice spoke, calm and clinical. "Driver Anthony Russ, you are transporting specialized cargo designated as Unit 777. This cargo is semi-autonomous and capable of determining its own optimal delivery location based on real-time data analysis. Your role is to provide transportation infrastructure. Please do not attempt to interfere with the delivery process." "Who is this? What kind of cargo is this?" "Classification is restricted. You were selected for this delivery based on your safety record and psychological profile. You will be compensated for the deviation from your scheduled route." "I don't want compensation. I want control of my truck back." "That is not possible. Unit 777 has assumed operational control to ensure delivery success. Please remain calm. Estimated arrival at destination, 42 minutes. The radio went silent. Anthony tried multiple channels but received only static. He was being hijacked, not by a person but by his own cargo. Whatever was in that trailer had taken over his truck systems and was driving itself to whatever destination it had chosen. Anthony tried to think of solutions. He couldn't jump from the truck at 55 miles per hour. He couldn't call for help. He couldn't regain control of the vehicle. His only option was to wait and see where the cargo wanted to go. The county road became progressively more rural. Small towns gave way to farmland, which gave way to forest. Traffic disappeared entirely. Anthony was alone on a narrow two-lane road winding through wilderness, heading toward what? The radio activated again. "Driver Russo, you are experiencing understandable anxiety. Please be assured that Unit 777 has no hostile intentions toward you. This delivery is simply necessary for research purposes." "Research into what?" "Autonomous cargo systems. Unit 777 is a prototype, a shipping container capable of determining its own delivery location based on environmental factors, supply chain optimization algorithms, and predictive demand modeling. You are participating in the first real-world test of this technology." "I didn't agree to be a test subject." "Your agreement was implicit in accepting the shipping contract. Section 14, paragraph 7. Driver acknowledges that certain cargo may require specialized handling and routing at the discretion of the shipper. This is specialized routing, Driver Russo. You are handling it admirably." "What happens when we reach the destination?" "The cargo will be unloaded. You will be released. Your truck systems will return to manual control. You will be compensated 3 times your standard delivery rate." "And if I refuse, if I find a way to stop this?" A long pause. Then, "That would be unfortunate. Unit 777 is programmed to complete delivery by any means necessary. Please do not force escalation of protocols." The implication was clear. If Anthony interfered, the cargo would do something worse than just taking control of his steering. He sat back in the driver's seat, useless now since he wasn't actually driving, and watched the road unspool before him. The forest grew denser, the road narrower. They were heading deep into wilderness, far from any marked destination on Anthony's maps. After 38 minutes, the truck turned onto a dirt road. No sign marked the turn. No gate or barrier suggested this road led anywhere important, just a gap in the trees and a worn dirt track disappearing into shadow. The truck drove for another mile, branches scraping against the trailer until they reached a clearing. In the center of the clearing sat a building that looked like a high-tech warehouse. Gleaming metal walls, no windows, a large loading dock with automated equipment. It was completely incongruous with the rural setting, like someone had dropped a Silicon Valley facility into the middle of Appalachian wilderness. The truck backed up to the loading dock with precision Anthony couldn't have matched on his best day. The trailer aligned perfectly with the dock plate. Then, without any human intervention, the trailer doors unlocked and opened. Anthony climbed out of the cab. He needed to see what was happening, needed to understand what he'd been hauling. The cargo unloaded itself. The boxes of medical supplies floated out of the trailer, actually floated, hovering 3 feet off the ground, moving in coordinated formation toward the warehouse. They were still glowing blue, still rearranging themselves, still doing things that cargo absolutely should not be capable of doing. As the last box floated into the warehouse, a door opened in the building's side. A person emerged. At least, Anthony thought it was a person. They wore a full hazmat suit that obscured any identifying features. "Driver Russo," the figure said, voice muffled by the suit. "Thank you for your cooperation. Unit 777 has reached its destination successfully. Your truck systems will be restored momentarily." "What was I carrying, really?" "Classified, but I can tell you that you've helped advance logistics technology by approximately 5 years. Autonomous cargo routing will revolutionize the shipping industry. Imagine deliveries that optimize themselves in real time, rerouting to wherever demand is highest, eliminating human error in the supply chain." "That's terrifying. You're talking about cargo that controls the vehicles transporting it, cargo that can hijack trucks and drivers." "Only temporarily, only when necessary for optimal delivery." "And what if the cargo decides somewhere dangerous is the optimal location? What if it roots itself into a school or a government building? You've created shipping that can weaponize itself." The figure paused. "Those concerns have been noted, but efficiency outweighs risk. It always has in logistics." A beeping sound came from Anthony's truck. The dashboard lights flickered, then returned to normal patterns. The engine, which had been running at the same steady RPM for nearly an hour, varied its tone naturally. Control had been returned. "Your compensation has been deposited," the figure said. "Please exit the facility grounds. This location does not exist on any map and should not be visited again. Your GPS will guide you back to the main highway." Anthony climbed into his truck and drove away, his hands shaking on the wheel that was finally responding to his input again. The GPS did indeed guide him back to the county road, then to I-75, then toward Atlanta as if nothing unusual had happened. He checked his bank account at the next truck stop. 3 times his standard rate had been deposited, exactly as promised. "Hey,